On 5 News tonight, an MP is killed after being stabbed and shot. Labour's Joe Cox was a married mother of 2 young children. She was attacked in her constituency in West Yorkshire. Witnesses describe the horrifying scene as she was kicked as she lay on the ground.
A guy with a baseball cap, white, dirtyish baseball cap, greyish, and he kicking at something in between, or somebody, between an empty space of 2 cars.
A man was then arrested during a major police operation. Tonight, politicians from all sides have spoken of their shock and sadness at Joe Cox's death, while the Prime Minister, David Cameron, says her killing is a tragedy for all.
She was a bright star, no doubt about it, a star for her constituents, a star in Parliament, and a star right across the House, and we've lost a star.
We'll be live at the small market town in West Yorkshire with the very latest. Also on the show, Sir Cliff Richard in the clear after the police investigation into sex abuse allegations is closed. And England beat Wales in dramatic fashion at Euro 2016. Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. A Labour MP and mother of 2 has died after being shot and stabbed in broad daylight. Joe Cox was attacked in the street in Birstall, close to where she holds her advice surgeries. One eyewitness said he saw a man punching and kicking her, then shooting her before stabbing her and leaving her to bleed on the pavement. A 52-year-old man was arrested at the scene. From there, Andy Bell sent us this report.
Joe Cox had been holding a regular surgery for her constituents in Birstall in West Yorkshire when she was attacked. She was stabbed and shot. She was treated briefly at the scene and then airlifted to hospital in Leeds, but her injuries proved to be too severe.
Our deepest sympathies to her family and friends at this tragic time. Joe was attacked by a man who inflicted serious and sadly ultimately fatal injuries. Shortly afterwards, a man was arrested nearby by local uniformed police officers. Weapons, including a firearm, have also been recovered.
This picture is believed to show the moment when a 52-year-old man was arrested. Armed officers had been called to the scene, and another 77-year-old man was slightly injured. Another man described to us the moment when he realised something was wrong.
Basically rushed with the customers, because we saw them screaming, going towards something that we didn't know. So we opened the door, we got out, and we saw a guy with a baseball cap, white, dirtyish baseball cap, greyish, and he kicking at something in between, or somebody in between between an empty space of 2 cars.
Batley is a town that has sent Labour MPs to this place for the best part of 100 years.
Joe Cox is the Labour MP for Batley and Spen. She was elected last year. On her social media Twitter account, she describes herself as a mum, she has 2 children, and a proud Yorkshire lass.
This is absolutely tragic and dreadful news, and my thoughts are with Joe's husband Brendan and the 2 children and their wider family. We've lost a great star. She was a MP, great campaigning MP with huge compassion, with a big heart, and people are going to be very, very sad at what has happened. Dreadful, dreadful news.
The whole of the Labour family are devastated tonight. Jo Cox has been killed doing her duty, doing her work as a constituency MP. She's somebody who dedicated her life to human rights and to justice. She worked for anti-slavery campaigns, she worked for Oxfam, and she became an MP for the area where she was born and grew up and loved.
And in the quiet market town of Birstall, people are still stunned by what has happened.
We've met her a few times. She's met my mum in person. She's been to my mum's property as well. It's just absolutely heartbreaking.
When we heard that she'd been shot, and then now it's just horrendous. It makes you think that we've been listening about gun crime other places, but when it happens in your own community, it's just a horrible thing.
Her husband tweeted this picture and he's issued a statement saying she would have wanted her 2 children to be bathed in love and that we all unite against the hatred that killed her. Andy Bell, 5 News, Birstall.
As you heard there, Joe Cox became Labour MP at the last general election for the West Yorkshire constituency where she was born. Her background was working class, and during summers away from Cambridge University while other students were travelling, she would go home to work in the toothpaste factory where her dad also worked. She would go on to a senior role at charity Oxfam before turning her attention to Westminster. Politicians from all sides have reacted to the news of her death with sadness. She leaves behind her husband Brendan and 2 young children, aged just 3 and 5. Simon Vigar looks back at her life now.
Joe Cox was an MP, a wife, a mother. After a career in the charity sector, campaigning against global poverty with Oxfam, Joe Cox was last year elected as the Labour MP for Batley and Spen in West Yorkshire.
I'm elated, but I'm humbled that the people of Batley and Spen have put their trust in me to be your next Member of Parliament. But I'm very excited, and my husband and I have been up all night, along with many of our friends, and we're just coming now to say thank you to people of Batley for voting.
It was a job she loved. Today, her husband Brendan tweeted this picture of his wife, the way he wants the world to remember her, smiling beside their houseboat in London. Many of the tributes have been made on Twitter. The Shadow Foreign Secretary Hilary Benn said, "May you rest eternal, Joe. We were all so proud to have known you and to call you our friend. You were the best of humanity." The Chancellor, George Osborne, said, "Incredibly sad to hear shocking news about Joe Cox. All my thoughts with Brendan and their children." The Tory peer Saida Varsi tweeted, "Devastating news. This is how I will remember Joe, a brave, principled politician, campaigner and a kind, warm person. R.I.P." The Home Secretary has paid this tribute.
The pain they must now be enduring is unimaginable, and our thoughts and prayers are with them at this terrible time.
Joe Cox is not the first MP to be attacked, but she is the first in living memory to be murdered. Her death will raise questions about the security of constituency MPs simply trying to carry out their democratic duties. Most poignantly, Joe Cox tweeted this picture of the recent Battle of the Thames. "My hubby, Mr. Brendan Cox, and children taking part in the Battle of the Thames because we're stronger in Remain." It was only yesterday. Simon Vigar, 5 News.
Let's go back now to our political editor Andy Bell, who's at the scene in Burston in West Yorkshire. And Andy, tell us more about what happened there today.
Well, the street where Joe Cox was attacked is behind me. It's still sealed off. We saw forensic officers investigating there about half an hour ago. Clearly they are continuing to try and gather evidence. Now, the man who's arrested was named to me here by local people as Tommy Mayer. He's a local man, described as quiet. Now, also people have reported that when the attack took place, the attacker was shouting out "Britain first." Now, I have spoken to people who heard what happened. They said they couldn't make out what was being said. I spoke to one person who claimed to have been the source of why that was being reported in that way, and he insisted that he had not said that what he heard was Britain first. That is the name of an organisation. We don't know if that really happened, and if it did happen, what exactly was being referred to. So there's a lot of speculation there about what was heard, what was shouted when Joe Cox was murdered. But obviously the investigation is continuing, and this small market town, which should really be a very quiet place on a day like this, is still coming to terms with a tragedy.
Andy, thank you very much indeed for now. We can speak on the phone to Julie Cooper, who's MP for Burnley and a friend of Joe Cox's. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Julie. Your memories of Joe Cox?
Yes, good evening. Joe and I were elected at the same time. We were both new Labour MPs together. And I think it's fair to say Joe was everybody's friend. She really was a ray of sunshine in Parliament. Really good at what she did. Very committed. A very committed opposition MP. But she could do that without attacking anybody personally. She had a great sense of humour, and I remember commenting to her how I admired the way she balanced family life with 2 young children and being such a hard-working, committed MP. And I'm just absolutely devastated by the news today.
And politicians of all sides, incredibly sad about this tragedy because she undoubtedly had a bright future, again, according to politicians of all stripes.
Absolutely. It's a sad loss to Parliament, and from a professional point of view as well as a personal one. I think we're all feeling the personal loss this afternoon. But undoubtedly, she was a big talent. He was going on to do a lot of good work, and the fact that just going about her duty today and doing the job that she was elected to do, she's met this tragic end. It's absolutely unbearable. It's hard to think of.
As my colleague Simon Vigar pointed out just a few moments ago, this is not the first time a Westminster politician has been attacked doing their job. Does it now raise concerns for the safety of you and your House of Commons colleagues?
I think it does raise concerns. Someone tried to attack me in my office a few months ago. There were no serious consequences, fortunately, on that occasion, but it did make me think about security, and my office now has heightened security. But when we're walking about in the community, we're never truly safe, and I think it underpins all that we do. It is a concern that we all have at the back of our minds. We do try to put it to one side and get on with the job because it's that job about it involves meeting people, the very essence of what we do. So you can't hide away and be a member of Parliament. It just seems a sad state of affairs that we can't pursue a democratic society and keep people safe. People who put themselves forward to serve can't be safe doing that.
And in terms of getting on with the job, well, the job of campaigning ahead of the EU referendum has been postponed by both sides for now. I imagine you think that's the right thing to do. How long should that last for?
It's not business as normal, nor should it be. This was not a normal happening, and as a mark of respect to Joe, my office will be closed tomorrow, and I will be campaigning for the EU referendum either. And I think we're all members on all sides, I'm sure, will want to take that approach.
Julie Cooper, MP for Burnley and friend of Joe Cox, many thanks indeed for joining us here on 5 News Tonight this evening. We can now speak to Kate Proctor, who is the Westminster correspondent for the Yorkshire Post. And Kate, I imagine you had many dealings with Joe Cox because she was an up-and-coming Labour MP.
That's right, yes. I started in September in Westminster and she'd been here just a few months before me. I came across her a lot. She's one of the MPs that I sort of had the best relationship with down here. It was clear from the start that she's a very warm person but also extremely bright, and she soon had a lot to add to Parliament.
And quite unusual, she was actually born in the constituency she represented. She very much was a West Yorkshire lass, as she called herself.
That's absolutely right. She was so proud of that, and in the many times that I interviewed her, she was so delighted that she was actually able to represent the constituency in which she was born. Her family, her parents still live there. I know it gave her a huge sense of pride, and you heard it from the night she was elected, and she brought it up all the time. And I think it's so nice that people in Yorkshire got that chance actually to be represented by someone so passionate.
And proud of her working class roots as well. She would go back on summers from university to work in the same toothpaste factory as her dad, and it was her experience, wasn't it, at Cambridge University that drove her to pursue politics later on in life.
That's right. It was at Cambridge. I think she very much felt a class system there that she didn't feel too comfortable with. It wasn't only Cambridge though. She also spoke of a time in South Africa when she was working in a hospital and she saw immense poverty there, and I know that was a really important moment for her, which sort of really galvanised her political thought and made her sort of want to enter politics further down the line. It was always to do with class and poverty for Jo.
Now, you deal with politicians probably more often than I do, and plenty of people are dubious as to their motives, but given her experience and her honesty about growing up and going through university, she was very much the conviction politician. She was there because she believed in it.
That's absolutely right. Some of the issues that she looked at, one was autism and one was trying to curb the waiting times that children have for diagnosis of autism. And that was one area that she's really focused on, but also she was heavily involved in making her case on the airstrikes in Syria. And she's, rare. She was obviously a Yorkshire lass, but she'd also had a long career at Oxfam too, and she had experience in the field out in the Middle East. So she brought some, knowledge to that issue that many MPs simply didn't have.
Birstall described as a small, market town, tight-knit community. We hear this so often. How do you think, though, that your patch, people in your patch of the Yorkshire region will react now to this tragic death of Joe Cox?
I think they'll be absolutely devastated. No one can think of anything like this. It's not an area that's, that has a lot of violent crime. It's so upsetting. She's a mother of two. And like I said before, she was so warm and friendly that in her short time as an MP, so many people have got to know her. So I think the town this evening will just be in an absolute state of shock.
Kate Proctor, Westminster correspondent of the Yorkshire Post, many thanks indeed. Still to come on 5 News tonight, the rest of the day's news, including Cliff Richard hitting out at police after he's cleared of historical sex abuse allegations. And also England get their glory in their Euros clash against Wales. Those stories coming up after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. Now, he's always denied any wrongdoing, and today it was confirmed that Sir Cliff Richard will not face charges over allegations of historical sex abuse. The Crown Prosecution Service says there isn't enough evidence to prosecute the 75-year-old singer, and South Yorkshire Police has apologised for how it initially handled the investigation. Sir Cliff says he is thrilled and described the allegations as vile. Layla Hayes has more.
He's been under suspicion for almost 2 years. This appearance at close friend Cilla Black's funeral, a rare public appearance. Sir Cliff Richard has always strenuously denied the allegations against him, and now he's been told he will face no further action. The singer had been accused by 4 men of historical sexual offences between 1958 and 1983. But the Crown Prosecution Service now says there is insufficient evidence to prosecute. Today, in a statement, Sir Cliff said, "I am obviously thrilled that the vile accusations and the resulting investigation have finally been brought to a close. Other than in exceptional cases, people who are facing allegations should never be named publicly until charged. I was named before I was even interviewed, and for me that was like being hung out like live bait." The investigation began dramatically in 2014 when detectives raided Sir Cliff's home in Berkshire, and the search was broadcast live by the BBC as a result of a deal between the broadcaster and police. Both were later heavily criticised for invading the star's privacy. South Yorkshire Police have now apologised to Sir Cliff for its handling of the case. Close friends say this has been the toughest time of his life.
I can't imagine how he feels, because I know the frustration has built up and the anger really has built up over nearly 2 years. So it would be hard for anybody to understand how that felt, to be accused of something in the wrong. And we as his friends always realised and always believed that he would be cleared. But it's just getting that legal clearance today. It's just fantastic.
Got myself a crying dog. The singer, known as the Peter Pan of pop, has had a career lasting nearly 60 years and was awarded a knighthood in 1995. Both his career and reputation were at risk, but there is no case to answer. Sir Cliff Richard has now thanked his fans, saying it would have been much harder without them. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
It is designed to help sick people before they need urgent care, but one NHS helpline has been accused of actually putting patients at risk of harm. The 111 service in the southwest of England has been described as inadequate in a damning report by the Quality Care Commission. Dominic Reynolds has been talking to one mother whose son died after GPs and the 111 service failed to spot his life-threatening condition.
It doesn't get any easier. You know, you don't wake up one morning and think, oh, I feel better today. You simply don't.
Melissa thought she was doing the right thing. When her son William fell ill, she called the NHS 111 service for advice. But she was given the wrong advice, and William died from sepsis the next day. The handler she spoke to and the local 111 service itself were criticised for serious failings.
When you found out how bad the problems with that service were, what was your reaction?
We were devastated. I think there's nothing worse than losing your child, but actually to know that your child died needlessly when there were holes in an organisation that you expect to not be there. Simple errors were made. You know, to be told that your child should have and could have survived is debilitating.
But 18 months on, the service hasn't improved. In fact, it's got worse. Officially labelled inadequate today by a Care Quality Commission report. Inspectors found that some patients were waiting too long for a callback, in one case 22 hours. There were often not enough staff to take calls or to give advice, and many of them were stressed and tired, with some not trained to assess patient symptoms properly. The Ambulance Trust's chief executive today said, "We treat every patient as our only patient, and we want every patient that makes contact with us to have a first-class service from an outstanding group of highly committed staff." Could we do better? Of course we could. Will we learn from this inspection? Of course we will.
He was just so happy and he was just so loving.
Almost 2 years on from William's death, Melissa's pregnant again and she's due in October. The agencies involved in what happened to William have apologised, but Melissa says the best apology is change. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News in Truro.
England have denied Wales automatic qualification into the next round of Euro 2016 in France with a last-gasp win over their neighbours. Liverpool's Daniel Sturridge scored the winner in the 91st minute, making the final score 2-1. Great news for England supporters, but tears from some of the Welsh. Peter Lane was watching with fans in Lens.
The sights and sounds of England and Wales on tour. Destination, the stadium in Lens. Atmosphere so much better than the past few days.
Don't panic!
Fans arm in arm, young and old, among them players' families. Thousands here streaming inside for the big moment. National anthems, national pride. Wales on their biggest stage for more than half a century. England playing catch-up in their group. And for England, first half frustrations. An early miss from Raheem Sterling. An appeal for handball. And a foul by captain Wayne Rooney, lining up a free kick for Wales star man Gareth Bale to put the Welsh ahead. This, the goal reaction in the fan zone at Lens, where Wales fans were outnumbered but not outvoiced. The second half began with Jamie Vardy and Daniel Sturridge brought on for England, and the switch delivered. A Vardy goal not long after brought the score level. And in the 91st minute, the deal was sealed by Sturridge.
So that's it, a British affair here in France. Welsh Dragons outroared by English Lions.
Brilliant.
Really
Brilliant.
Glad you came.
Very glad we
Wouldn't
came.
have missed it for the world.
Wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Scoreline helps.
It helps.
Certainly helps. Absolutely gutted, devastated. What a nightmare.
Wales!
You're still smiling.
Still smiling! What an amazing tournament.
A lively match, a lively crowd, and here at least the spirit of England and Wales together. Peter Lane, 5 News.
And during that report from Peter, Northern Ireland have beaten Ukraine at Euro 2016. They won 2-0. Let's go back to our top story now. The death of Labour MP Joe Cox. The 41-year-old has died after being shot and stabbed in her constituency in West Yorkshire. Adrian Lovett worked with Joe at the charity Oxfam for 15 years. We can speak to him now, live from Washington, D.C. Good evening to you, Adrian. Many thanks indeed for joining us this evening. And what's difficult to understand is that this would happen to Joe Cox in somewhere as innocuous as Birstall when, working for Oxfam, she went to many dangerous places around the world.
She did. Early in the years when I worked with her, she took a number of British MPs to Darfur. There's never a good time to go to Darfur, and at the time that she was there, it was a really tough place to be. And I remember her talking about how determined she was to show those British MPs the reality of what was happening there in order to demand that that they take action back here. And I guess that's what she took into her political career in the last few years, an extraordinary passion for justice, to make the world better, but also an incredible passion for life. And that's what, you know, so many of her friends remember and will remember and are just sort of absorbing and digesting today. She was somebody with the biggest heart. It's hard to avoid cliches and so on times like this, but that's what she was. She had an extraordinary heart, an extraordinary love of life and laughter and the outdoors. You know, she'd put a raincoat on sooner than she'd put a pair of sunglasses on. And she touched so many lives in her personal life, but also in the incredible work that she did, making such a huge difference to the world.
Desperately sad, leaving behind her 2 young children, ages 3 and 5, her husband Brendan as well, who in a statement this afternoon said she lived her life with no regrets. As you say there, she lived it absolutely to the full.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you know, long before her parliamentary career, she was living life using her incredible talent. She was an extraordinarily talented woman at communicating, but most of all, engaging with people. And last year, I saw her a few months ago in the House of Commons for a cup of tea. She was talking about how she'd been building this campaign on Syria, and she was challenging both the government, and she was tough on the government, but also her own side to take much more seriously Britain's obligation to do its part in Syria. But she did that by connecting with people, by reaching across the aisle, by understanding people, and she clearly showed that not just in Parliament, not just in Yorkshire, in her constituency that she was so passionate about, but with her friends who were thinking of her tonight and just desperately shocked and sad.
Adrian Lovett, former colleague and close friend of Joe Cox, many thanks indeed for joining us this evening from the States. Let's go back to Andy Bell, who's in Bristol. And Andy, such a terrible incident. We've had more reaction from fellow MPs of all colours this evening.
Yes, we've had a reaction from Stephen Timms, Labour MP, who was attacked in very similar circumstances, as far as we can work out, 6 years ago in East London. He fortunately made a complete recovery. He described Joe Cox today as a wonderful MP and a wonderful person. And everybody is coming to terms with the fact that a very promising career for this young woman has been cut short. Tonight, flags at Westminster and at Parliament are at half-mast, but of course, by far the most important impact is on her family, and especially on the husband and the 2 young children that she leaves behind.
Andy Bell in West Yorkshire for us this evening. Many thanks indeed. That is it from us for now. Sian Welby is here with the weather next, and Danny Sinha has updates throughout the evening here on Channel 5. For now, thanks for your company. Bye-bye.